I still remember the exact moment my entire life shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces. Standing in that crawlspace beneath our kitchen floor, holding a diary that bore my face in photographs I'd never seen, next to a woman who looked like an older version of me, a ghost I'd never been told existed. My mother, the woman I called Mom for 16 years, was kneeling behind me, her face drained of all color, her mouth forming words that wouldn't come. And in my trembling hands, Margaret's final entry screamed the truth that would unravel everything I thought I knew about love, sacrifice, and the lies we tell to protect the people we claim to cherish. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me rewind to where this really begins, to the day we moved into the house on Ashwood Lane, the house my mother bought with a strange, almost manic determination, the house that would become both our salvation and our curse. My name is Emma Morrison, and until 3 months ago, I believed my life was relatively simple. My mother, Claire, had raised me alone since I was born. She told me my father was a mistake from her 20s, someone who left before I was even born, someone whose name she refused to speak. I'd accepted this narrative without question because I had no reason not to. My mother was my entire world, a fierce, protective force who worked double shifts as a real estate agent to keep us afloat, who moved us from apartment to apartment across 3 different states, always promising that someday we'd have a real home of our own. That someday finally came when I was 16, in the form of a 3-story Victorian house in Ashford, Massachusetts, a sleepy New England town where autumn leaves actually crunched under your feet like in the movies, where people knew their neighbors' names, where everything felt like the normal, stable life I'd always craved. The house was beautiful in that weathered, romantic way, peeling paint the color of faded lavender, a wraparound porch with intricate woodwork, tall windows that let in golden afternoon light. It needed work, my mother said, but it was ours. I remember the day we got the keys. My mother stood on the porch, her hands shaking as she unlocked the front door, and for just a second I saw something flicker across her face, something that looked like fear or maybe grief, or maybe both tangled together in a way I couldn't name. But then she smiled at me, that bright, reassuring smile that had gotten us through every hardship, every midnight move, every moment when I'd asked why we couldn't just stay somewhere longer than a year. "Welcome home, sweetheart," she'd said, and I'd believed her. The first 2 months were a blur of unpacking, painting walls, arguing about whether my bedroom should be sage green or dusty blue, enrolling in Ashford High School where I was the perpetual new girl yet again. My mother threw herself into renovation projects with an intensity that seemed excessive even for her. She was always measuring something, always consulting with contractors, always insisting on doing certain jobs herself without explaining why. She became almost obsessive about the kitchen, spending hours stripping old wallpaper, replacing cabinet hardware, refinishing the hardwood floors herself on her hands and knees. I thought she was just being a perfectionist. I thought she was finally channeling all her restless energy into creating the permanent home she'd always promised me. I didn't realize she was trying to bury something. The crawlspace revealed itself on a Tuesday afternoon in late October. I'd come home early from school. The cross-country coach had canceled practice because of rain and found my mother at an open house across town. I decided to surprise her by continuing the kitchen renovation work she'd been doing. She'd been pulling up the floorboards near the far corner by the pantry, claiming there was water damage that needed addressing, though I'd never seen any evidence of leaks. I put on her work gloves and started prying up the next section of boards, working my way toward the wall. That's when I noticed something strange. The floorboards didn't extend all the way to the wall like they should have. There was a gap, and when I shined my phone's flashlight into it, I could see there was space underneath. Not just the normal crawl space you'd expect in an old house, but what looked like a deliberately constructed void, maybe 3 feet deep, running the length of the wall. My 16-year-old brain, fueled by too many true crime podcasts and Stephen King novels, immediately went to the darkest possibilities. Was this where previous owners had hidden valuables during the Depression? Was this some kind of underground railroad passage? Was there a body down there? That last thought should have been a joke, but it made my stomach turn in a way I couldn't explain. I should have waited for my mother. I should have called her, let her handle it, respected the boundaries she'd established about which renovation projects were hers alone. But I was 16 and curious, and convinced I was about to discover something amazing, something that would make us local legends, something that would finally make me interesting to my new classmates who barely knew I existed. I used a crowbar to pry away more boards, creating an opening large enough to squeeze through. The smell that rose up was musty but not unbearable. Old wood, dust, something vaguely chemical like mothballs. I lowered myself down carefully, my phone's flashlight cutting through the darkness. The space was larger than I'd expected, maybe 4 feet high, allowing me to crouch but not stand. The walls were the original stone foundation, and the dirt floor was hard-packed and even. And then I saw the boxes. They were stacked against the far wall, maybe 6 or 7 of them, old cardboard boxes that had survived remarkably well in the dry darkness. My hands were shaking as I opened the first one, expecting old clothes or books or Christmas decorations. Instead, I found children's drawings, dozens of them, rendered in crayon and marker, showing stick-figure families and houses with smoking chimneys and smiling suns. Some were signed Margaret, age 7, or Margaret, age 9. The art was good, better than you'd expect from a child, with attention to detail in the shading and perspective. I opened the second box and found photographs, hundreds of them, loose and in albums, spanning what looked like several decades. Many showed 2 young girls, probably sisters given their similar features, growing up together. I recognized one of them immediately because she was in every photo I'd ever seen of my mother's childhood. That was Claire, my mother, with her serious dark eyes and the spattering of freckles across her nose that I'd inherited. The other girl had to be Margaret, blonder than my mother, with a wider smile. These photos were more recent, maybe 17, 18 years old based on the clothing and the slightly faded quality of the prints. They showed Margaret as a young woman, probably early 20s, and she was pregnant. Very pregnant, glowing in some photos, exhausted in others. And beside her in many of the pictures was my mother, younger but unmistakably Claire, her hand on Margaret's swollen belly, her face a mixture of joy and worry. And then there were photos of a baby, a newborn with wispy dark hair and serious eyes, wrapped in a yellow blanket that I recognized because I'd seen it in my own baby photos. The same blanket, the same baby, me. In photo after photo, Margaret held me with the uncertain grip of a new mother, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. And in photo after photo, my mother Claire, hovered nearby, her arms outstretched as if ready to catch me should Margaret's grip falter, her expression tight with anxiety I'd never seen in any of my official baby pictures. In those official pictures, the ones in albums on our living room shelf, Claire held me alone. Claire smiled at the camera with the fierce pride of a single mother doing it on her own. There was never anyone else, never a sister, never a Margaret. I was shaking so hard I almost dropped my phone. My breath came in short, sharp gasps that echoed in the confined space. I grabbed the last box with trembling hands and found what I was searching for without knowing I was searching. A diary, bound in cracked leather, its pages filled with cramped, desperate handwriting. I flipped to the final entry, dated 17 years ago, my hands leaving smudges on the aged paper. The entry was short, written in handwriting that deteriorated from neat script at the beginning to barely legible scrawl by the end. The baby is crying again. She never stops crying. Claire says it's normal that all babies cry, but I know the truth. There's something wrong with her, something wrong with me for bringing her into this world. The shadows in the corner of her nursery move when I'm alone with her. They whisper things, terrible things about what I should do to keep her safe, to keep us all safe. Claire thinks I'm imagining it, but Claire has always been blind to the things that hide in the dark places of this house, of our family, of my mind. I tried to tell the doctors, but they just gave me more pills that make everything fuzzy without making the whispers stop. I can't sleep anymore. Every time I close my eyes, I see what the baby will become, what she'll do, the darkness she'll bring. It would be mercy, wouldn't it? To stop it now before the curse can take root. Claire found me in the nursery last night, standing over the crib with a pillow in my hands. I don't remember picking it up. I don't remember walking into the room. But Claire was screaming at me, and the baby was crying, and I realized what I'd almost done, what the whispers had almost convinced me to do. I'm leaving, it's the only way. If I'm not here, the darkness can't use me as a vessel. If I'm not here, Claire can protect her the way I can't. Claire will be a better mother than I could ever be. Claire has always been stronger, always been the good one, the responsible one, the one our parents loved best. If Claire finds this, tell Emma I tried to protect her. Tell her the blood doesn't have to matter. Tell her to be nothing like me. If I find this, if I ever come back and read these words again, tell me it's time to finish what I started that night in the nursery. Tell me some people don't deserve to live. Tell me. The entry ended there, mid-sentence, as if Margaret had been interrupted or simply couldn't bring herself to write the rest. I heard my mother's voice from upstairs calling my name with rising panic. Emma, Emma, where are you? Emma, please answer me. I should have answered. I should have climbed out of that crawl space and demanded explanations like a rational person. Instead, I clutched the diary to my chest and screamed. A raw, primal sound that carried every ounce of betrayal and confusion and rage that was ripping through my 16-year-old heart. My mother's footsteps thundered across the floor above me, and then she was there at the opening, staring down at me with a face that confirmed every terrible suspicion blooming in my mind. She knew. She'd always known. And she'd lied to me every single day of my entire life. Emma, sweetheart, please come up here. Please let me explain. Her voice was shaking, tears already streaming down her face, her hand reaching down toward me. I didn't take it. I climbed out on my own, the diary still clutched in one hand, my phone in the other with Margaret's face frozen on the screen. Margaret, who looked so much like me, it was like seeing my own ghost, my own future, my own genetic destiny written in the haunted eyes of a woman who'd wanted me dead. Who lived here? I heard myself ask, though I already knew the answer. I needed to hear her say it. I needed to hear her admit to the lie that had built my entire existence. Who is Margaret, Mom? Why do I look exactly like her? Why is she holding me in these photos? Why, my voice broke. Why does her diary say you're her sister? My mother, Claire. I should call her Claire now because what right did she have to the title of mother when everything was a lie? Sank to her knees on the kitchen floor, her face crumbling in a way I'd never seen. She'd always been so strong, so unshakable, the rock upon which my whole world was built. Seeing her break should have softened me, but instead, it made me angrier because it felt like manipulation, like she was the victim when I was the one who'd been lied to for 16 years. Emma, please sit down. Please let me explain everything. I can explain everything if you'll just. Is Margaret my mother? I interrupted, my voice cold and hard in a way that didn't sound like me. Is my actual mother the woman who wanted to suffocate me with a pillow? Is that why we've been running my entire life? Not because you were a struggling single mom making a fresh start, but because you kidnapped me from your own sister. I didn't kidnap you. Claire's voice rose to match mine, sharp with desperation. I saved you. I saved you from a woman who was sick, who was dangerous, who would have. She stopped herself, pressing her hands to her mouth as if she could shove the words back in. Who would have what? Killed me. Is that what you were going to say? I was screaming now, months and years of teenage angst and confusion and feeling different, finding a target, finding justification. My own mother wanted me dead, and you, what? You just took me. You just raised me as your own and never thought I deserved to know the truth. You were 3 months old." Claire was crying openly now, her carefully maintained composure completely shattered. You were 3 months old, and she was suffering from postpartum psychosis. The doctors said it was treatable, that with medication and therapy she could recover, but she wouldn't take the medication. She said it made the whispers worse, that it made the shadows stronger. I tried to help her. God, Emma, I tried everything. I moved in with her after you were born. I took leave from work. I stayed up nights watching her, because I was terrified of what she might do. Then why didn't you tell me? I demanded. Why all the lies? Why buy this house, her house, and not tell me we were living in the place my biological mother disappeared from? Claire's face went even paler. You knew. You knew this was her house. I know now. I gestured wildly at the boxes I'd dragged up from the crawlspace, the evidence of our shared past spilling across the kitchen floor. I know everything now. I know that my real name is probably not even Emma Morrison. I know that my entire life has been a fiction you created to make yourself feel better about whatever happened to Margaret. Where is she, Claire? Where's my actual mother? The use of her first name landed like a physical blow. I saw her flinch, saw something die in her eyes that might have been hope that this conversation could end with us still being mother and daughter in the way we'd always been. "I don't know," she whispered. "I swear to you, Emma, I don't know where Margaret is. That night, the night she disappeared, I found her in your nursery with the pillow exactly like she wrote in her diary. I screamed at her. I grabbed you from the crib. I told her I was calling the police, calling our parents, calling everyone who could help her get treatment whether she wanted it or not. And she looked at me with these empty eyes and said, 'You were always the one they wanted. You were always the good daughter, so you be her mother. You're better at it anyway.' And then she ran out of the house. It was raining, the middle of the night. I wanted to chase her, but I had you in my arms and you were crying, and I didn't know if she'd come back. I didn't know if leaving you alone even for a second was safe." Claire's words came faster now, spilling out like she'd been holding them in for 17 years and couldn't stop the flood now that the dam had broken. "I called the police. I called our parents. I told them everything, the postpartum psychosis, the attempts to hurt you, the fact that she'd run off into the night. They searched for her for weeks. They dragged the river. They checked hospitals and shelters and bus stations. They found her car abandoned at the Canadian border with her purse still in it, but no sign of Margaret. No body. No evidence of foul play. The police eventually ruled it a voluntary disappearance. Our parents, your grandparents, they blamed me. They said I should have done more, should have committed her to a hospital, should have prevented her from running. They said if anything had happened to her, it was my fault for letting her leave. So you just took me? You just decided to raise me as your own." I couldn't wrap my mind around it. Couldn't reconcile the fierce, protective mother I'd known with this woman who'd built my entire existence on a foundation of lies. What was I supposed to do? Claire's voice rose again, defensive now. Give you to our parents who'd already proven they had no idea how to handle mental illness in the family. Put you in foster care. Margaret had signed paperwork when you were born naming me as your godmother, giving me legal guardianship if anything should happen to her. After she disappeared, after the police closed the case, I formalized the adoption. It was all legal, Emma. I didn't steal you, I protected you. You lied to me. I screamed back. For 16 years, you lied to me about who I am, where I come from, who my real mother was. You bought her house. Why would you do that? Why would you bring me here of all places? This seemed to be the question Claire had been dreading most. She looked away, her hands twisted together so tightly her knuckles were white. Because I thought if I could transform this house, make it into something new and beautiful, it would somehow erase what happened here. I thought if I could give you a real home in the place where your story began, it would somehow make up for all the lies, all the running, all the years of instability. I thought God. I thought I could rewrite history by literally renovating it. That's insane. I laughed, but it was a bitter, broken sound. That's literally the logic of an insane person. You thought painting walls and replacing floorboards would what? Magically make it okay that you've been lying to me since I was old enough to ask questions. I wasn't trying to make it okay. Claire shouted, and now she was angry too, her guilt transforming into defensiveness. I was trying to give you a better life than the one you would have had. Do you understand what it's like to watch your sister spiral into madness? To see her look at her own child with hatred and fear? To know that the genetic lottery that gave you her face might have also given you her demons? The room went silent. The truth hung between us like smoke, acrid and choking. Is that what you think? I asked quietly. That I'm going to end up like her, that I'm going to go crazy too? No, Claire reached for me, but I stepped back. No, sweetheart, that's not what I meant. Don't call me that. My voice was ice. Don't call me sweetheart or honey or baby or any of the things mothers call their daughters, because you're not my mother. Margaret is my mother. The woman who wanted me dead is my actual biological mother, and you're just the person who's been pretending for 16 years. I saw the words hit her like bullets. I saw her face crumple. I saw her hand reach out and then fall to her side when she realized I meant it, that something between us had broken that might never be repaired. Emma, please, she whispered. Please don't say that. I raised you. I loved you. I sacrificed everything to give you a normal life. I am your mother in every way that matters. Accept the truth, I shot back. Accept the honesty. Accept the basic respect of telling me who I actually am. I grabbed Margaret's diary and as many photos as I could carry and walked out of the kitchen, out of the house, out into the October afternoon, where the world looked exactly the same as it had that morning, even though everything had changed. I heard Claire calling after me, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I walked to the town library because it was the only place I could think to go, the only neutral ground where I could sit and think and begin to process the magnitude of what I'd learned. I claimed a corner table in the back and spread out the photos, arranging them in chronological order, watching Margaret's transformation from a carefree child to a troubled young woman, to a new mother whose eyes held nothing but fear. I opened the diary and began reading from the beginning, prepared to hate Margaret for wanting me dead, prepared to find evidence that Claire had been right to keep this from me. Instead, I found heartbreak. The early entries were normal. A young woman excited about her unexpected pregnancy, scared but determined, making plans for a future with her baby. She wrote about painting the nursery yellow because she didn't want to know the gender, about reading parenting books and taking prenatal vitamins, about arguing with Claire over baby names. She wanted Emma if it was a girl, she wrote, because it meant universal or whole, and she wanted her daughter to be complete in a way Margaret had never felt complete. So my name, at least, had come from her. That was something. But as the pregnancy progressed, the entries grew darker. Margaret wrote about dreams that felt too real, about waking up in places she didn't remember going, about voices that whispered terrible things when she was alone. She wrote about family history, a grandmother who died in an asylum, an uncle who'd committed suicide, a great-aunt who drowned her children before walking into the ocean. Mental illness, Margaret wrote, ran through our bloodline like poison in water, inevitable and inescapable. After my birth, the entries became frantic, sometimes written in the middle of the night, sometimes barely legible. Margaret described postpartum depression so severe she couldn't bond with me, couldn't bear to hold me, felt nothing but terror when she looked at my face. She wrote about the doctors who prescribed medication and therapy, about Claire who moved in to help, about our parents who said she just needed to try harder, to pray more, to stop being so dramatic. And she wrote about the night Claire found her in the nursery, about the moment when she realized what she'd been about to do, about the horror and shame that sent her running into the rain because she believed the only way to protect me was to remove herself from my life entirely. The last coherent entry, written a few days before the final one I'd already read, was a letter to me. Dear Emma asterisk. If you're reading this, it means I failed you in every possible way. It means I wasn't strong enough to fight the darkness in my mind. It means Claire had to step in and be the mother you deserved. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that my weakness became your burden. Please don't hate Claire for whatever she had to do to protect you. She loves you more than I was ever capable of loving anyone. She's always been the strong one, the good one, the one who could handle things that broke me. If she lied to you about me, it's because she was trying to give you a chance at a normal life without the weight of my failure dragging you down. And please don't think you're doomed to become me. Mental illness isn't destiny. Get help if you need it. Take the medication if they offer it. Don't be too proud or too scared to admit when the darkness is winning. Be smarter than I was. Be stronger than I was. Be everything I couldn't be. I love you even though I couldn't show it. I love you even though I failed you. I love you enough to leave so you could have a better life without me. Love, Margaret, though I don't deserve to call myself your mother. I sat in that library until they announced closing time, reading Margaret's words over and over, crying quietly into my sleeve, trying to reconcile the two stories that were both true. Claire had lied to me for 16 years, and Claire had saved my life and given me everything she had. Margaret had wanted me dead, and Margaret had loved me enough to disappear so I could live. The librarian, an older woman with kind eyes, brought me tissues without asking questions. When I finally gathered the photos and diary, she touched my shoulder gently and said, "Whatever you're going through, honey, remember that families are complicated. People do terrible things for good reasons and good things for terrible reasons. And sometimes the only thing you can do is decide whether to forgive or to walk away." I walked home in the dark, the autumn air cold against my tear-stained face. The house on Ashwood Lane glowed with warm light from every window. Claire was waiting on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, her face anxious and aged a decade since that morning. When she saw me, she stood but didn't approach, didn't assume she had the right to embrace me anymore. "Can we talk?" I asked. She nodded, and we went inside. We sat at the kitchen table where this had all started, the boxes of Margaret's things still scattered across the floor like archaeological evidence of a life I'd never known I was connected to. "I read her diary," I said, "all of it." Claire's hands trembled around her coffee mug. And I understand why she left. I understand why she thought she was protecting me." I paused, choosing my words carefully. "But I don't understand why you lied to me for so long. I don't understand why you thought I was too fragile to handle the truth." Claire was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but steady. "Because I was afraid. I was afraid that if you knew Margaret was your mother, you'd see yourself in her mental illness. I was afraid you'd think you were destined to end up like her. I was afraid you'd look at me and see a kidnapper instead of a mother who loves you more than anything in this world." "Did you ever try to find her?" I asked. "After she disappeared, did you keep looking?" "Every single day for the first 5 years," Claire said. "I hired private investigators. I checked missing persons databases. I called hospitals and shelters in every state. I even worked with a psychic once out of desperation. But it was like Margaret had simply ceased to exist. No activity on her bank accounts. No usage of her social security number. No sightings, no contacts, nothing. After a while, I had to accept that either she didn't want to be found, or she couldn't be found because she was—" Claire's voice broke. "Because she wasn't alive to be found. Do you think she's dead, I asked bluntly. Claire met my eyes. Honestly, I don't know. Part of me hopes she found peace somewhere, started a new life, got treatment and recovered. But part of me knows that the Margaret I knew, the sister I grew up with, she wouldn't have stayed away this long if she were alive and well. She would have at least tried to contact me to ask about you, to make sure you were okay. We sat in silence, the weight of 17 years of questions without answers settling over us like snow. Why did you buy this house? I asked again, needing to understand. Of all the houses in all the towns we could have chosen, why bring me here? Claire looked around the kitchen, at the walls she'd repainted, the floors she'd refinished, the space she'd been trying to transform. Because I thought if I could make it beautiful, if I could fill it with good memories instead of bad ones, it would somehow heal something in me that's been broken since the night Margaret left. I thought if you grew up here and were happy here, it would prove that the past doesn't have to define the future. I thought, she laughed bitterly. I thought I could control the narrative by controlling the space. I see now how delusional that was. It was pretty delusional, I agreed, but my voice was softer now, less accusatory. But I get it. I get wanting to rewrite history. I get wanting to protect someone you love from painful truths. Claire looked up sharply, hope flickering in her exhausted eyes. Does that mean? It means I need time, I interrupted. It means I can't just pretend this didn't happen, that you didn't lie to me for my entire life. It means I need to figure out who I am, knowing that my biological mother was mentally ill and wanted me dead, and that the woman who raised me thought I was too weak to handle the truth. I took a breath. But it also means I know you saved my life. I know you sacrificed everything to give me a stable childhood. I know that love doesn't have to mean honesty, even though it should. I'm so sorry, Emma. Claire was crying again, but quietly now, with the exhaustion of someone who'd been holding back tears for 17 years. I'm sorry I lied. I'm sorry I thought I knew better than you did about what you could handle. I'm sorry I let my own fear and guilt guide my choices, instead of trusting you with the truth. I'm sorry too, I said, surprising myself. I'm sorry I said you weren't my mother. You are my mother in all the ways that count. But Margaret, she's part of me too, whether I like it or not. Her illness, her genes, her story, they're part of my story now. Claire reached across the table, and this time I took her hand. We'll figure it out together, she said. We'll figure out who you are and who you want to be, and we'll do it honestly this time. No more secrets. No more lies. I promise. Can we visit her? I asked suddenly. Margaret, I mean. If there's a grave or a memorial or something, can we visit her? Claire nodded. There's a memorial tree in the town cemetery. Our parents, your grandparents, planted it 5 years after she disappeared, when the police officially declared her legally dead. I go there sometimes on her birthday to talk to her, to tell her about you. Can we go tomorrow? I asked. We can go right now if you want, Claire offered. We drove to the cemetery in silence, the same silence that had filled the car during so many moves, so many midnight departures from apartments and towns and lives we'd briefly tried on before discarding them. But this silence felt different, not the silence of things unsaid, but the silence of things finally spoken, finally acknowledged, finally brought into the light. The memorial tree was a white oak, its branches bare in the October cold, its trunk already thick despite only 15 years of growth. A small bronze plaque at its base read, Margaret Elizabeth Morrison, beloved daughter and mother, may her spirit find peace. I knelt beside it, placing my hand on the rough bark, feeling the strange connection to a woman I'd never known but who'd given me life, given me her face, given me her name. Hi, Margaret, I said softly, feeling foolish but also strangely compelled to speak. I'm Emma. I'm your daughter. I found your diary today. I found all your pictures. I found out about everything. Beside me, Claire knelt too, her hand finding mine in the darkness. "We're here together," she said, speaking to the tree as if Margaret could hear. "Emma and me. We're here to tell you that we understand. We understand why you left. We understand why you thought it was the only way. And we forgive you." I looked at Claire in surprise. "We do." She squeezed my hand. "Don't we? Can't we forgive her for being human, for being sick, for doing the best she could with an illness that wanted to destroy her?" I thought about Margaret's diary entries, about the desperation and self-loathing that dripped from every word, about a young mother who'd loved her child enough to remove herself from the equation before she could cause irreparable harm. I thought about Claire, who'd lied to protect me but had also sacrificed her entire adult life to raise me. I thought about forgiveness, how it's not about saying someone's actions were okay, but about releasing yourself from the burden of carrying their mistakes. "Yes," I said finally, "we forgive her." And I turned to look at Claire, really look at her in the dim cemetery light, seeing not just the woman who'd lied, but the woman who'd loved me fiercely enough to build an entire life around protecting me. "I forgive you too." Claire pulled me into her arms, and we cried together beneath Margaret's tree, mourning the sister and mother we'd lost, mourning the years of lies and secrets, mourning the easier path we'd never get to walk, but also celebrating in our strange way, the truth finally told, the secrets finally revealed, the foundation finally honest even if it was cracked. We stayed until the cemetery closed, talking about Margaret, about the family history I'd never known, about the grandmother in the asylum, and I promised to try to forgive, to try to understand, to try to see her not as a liar but as a flawed human who'd done her broken best in an impossible situation. The drive home was quiet but comfortable. When we pulled into the driveway of the house on Ashwood Lane, I looked at it with new eyes. It wasn't just our fresh start anymore. It was Margaret's house, the place where she'd struggled and suffered and ultimately made the choice to disappear rather than destroy the child she couldn't properly love. It was the house where my story had truly begun, not in the fiction Claire had created but in the messy, painful reality of mental illness and sacrifice and impossible choices. "We're still going to renovate it, right?" I asked as we walked up the porch steps. "We're still going to make it beautiful." Claire smiled, and it was the first real smile I'd seen from her all day. "We're absolutely going to make it beautiful. But maybe now we do it as a tribute to Margaret instead of trying to erase her. Maybe we honor the truth instead of trying to bury it under new floorboards." "I'd like that," I said. We went inside, and Claire made hot chocolate while I gathered Margaret's boxes from the kitchen floor. Instead of hiding them away, we decided to create a memory corner in the living room, a space where Margaret's art and photos and even her diary could exist openly. Honestly, an acknowledgement that she was part of our family story whether she was physically present or not. As we worked, sorting through 17 years of hidden history, I found myself thinking about the title Margaret had wanted for me, Emma, meaning universal or whole. She'd wanted me to be complete in a way she'd never felt complete. She'd wanted me to be everything her mental illness wouldn't let her be. "Can I ask you something?" I said as Claire hung one of Margaret's childhood drawings on the wall. "Do you think I'll inherit her mental illness? Do you think I'm destined to end up like her?" Claire set down the hammer and looked at me seriously. "I think you might have a genetic predisposition to certain mental health conditions. I think you should be aware of that, should watch for warning signs, should never hesitate to seek help if you need it. But I also think you're not Margaret. You're Emma, strong, smart, brave enough to demand the truth even when it hurts. You're the daughter of a woman who loved you enough to leave, and you're the daughter of a woman who loved you enough to stay. Both of those things are true, and both of those things make you who you are." "And who am I?" I asked, the question that had been haunting me since I'd opened that first box in the crawlspace. Claire pulled me close. "You're my daughter. You're Margaret's daughter. You're Emma Morrison, age 16, who loves cross-country running and terrible horror movies and reading until 3 in the morning. You're someone who deserves the truth, even when it's complicated. You're someone who's going to figure out who she wants to be, regardless of who she came from. And whoever you decide to be, I'm going to be here supporting you, honestly this time. But we stayed up late that night, going through every box, every photo, every scrap of evidence from the life Margaret had lived before mental illness had stolen her future. We laughed at photos of her and Claire as children, building blanket forts and putting on plays in the backyard. We cried at photos from my as dawn broke over Ashford, turning the sky pink and gold. Claire and I stood on the porch of the house on Ashwood Lane, exhausted but lighter somehow, unburdened by the weight of secrets finally told. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for telling me the truth, finally." "Thank you for giving me the chance to tell it," Claire replied. "Thank you for not hating me." "I could never hate you," I said and meant it. Even when I said you weren't my mother, even when I was angry and hurt, I could never hate you. You saved my life. You gave me everything. You just also lied to me for 16 years, and that's going to take time to fully forgive. "I understand," Claire said. "Take all the time you need, I'll be here." And she was. In the weeks and months that followed, as I processed the magnitude of what I'd learned, as I started therapy to address my own anxiety and the very real possibility of inherited mental health struggles, as I gradually learned to integrate both parts of my story, the daughter Margaret birthed and the daughter Claire raised, she was there. Not perfect, not always saying the right thing, but honest now in a way she'd never been before. We finished renovating the house together, turning it into something that honored both the pain and the beauty of our complicated family history. Margaret's memory corner grew to include not just photos and artwork, but also information about postpartum psychosis, about genetic mental illness, about the importance of seeking help and removing stigma. We turned it into something educational, something that could help other families facing similar struggles. I reconnected with my grandparents, Margaret and Claire's parents, who were shocked but grateful to be back in my life. They shared more stories about Margaret before her illness, about the creative, vibrant young woman she'd been, about the family history that had predisposed her to mental health struggles. They also apologized for blaming Claire, for not understanding how serious Margaret's condition had been, for the ways their own shame about mental illness in the family had prevented them from providing adequate support. And slowly, gradually, I began to build my own identity, not as Margaret's ghost or Claire's project, but as Emma Morrison, a young woman who came from a complicated story but who was writing her own ending. I decided to study psychology in college, to specialize in postpartum mental health, to turn my family's tragedy into something that could help others. It felt like honoring both mothers, the one who'd suffered and the one who'd saved. On the 1-year anniversary of discovering the Crawlspace, Claire and I returned to Margaret's memorial tree. We'd brought a new plaque to add beside the original one, this one reading, "Margaret Elizabeth Morrison, who loved her daughter enough to let her go. May her story help others find the courage to seek help." As we planted flowers around the base of the tree, bright yellow marigolds, Emma's favorite, I realized that forgiveness wasn't a single moment but an ongoing choice. Every day I chose to forgive Claire for lying. Every day I chose to forgive Margaret for being too sick to be my mother. Every day I chose to forgive myself for being angry, for still being angry sometimes, for the complicated mess of emotions that came with having two mothers, one who'd given me life and one who'd given me a life worth living. "Do you think she's watching somehow?" I asked Claire as we worked. "Do you think she knows what became of us?" Claire sat back on her heels, considering. "I don't know if I believe in that kind of thing, but I hope so. I hope she knows you're okay. I hope she knows you're strong and kind and determined to break the cycle. I hope she knows her sacrifice wasn't in vain." "I hope so too," I said. We finished planting the flowers and sat together beneath the white oak, watching the spring sun filter through its budding leaves. The tree had grown since last year, stronger and taller, its roots digging deep into the earth. its branches reaching toward the sky. Like us, I thought. Like our complicated, broken, beautiful family growing around the truth instead of trying to bury it. I leaned against Claire's shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of the only mother I'd ever really known, the woman who'd lied to protect me and told the truth to honor me. And I thought about Margaret wherever she was, alive or dead, recovered or still struggling, and I sent out a thought like a prayer. Thank you for giving me life. Thank you for loving me enough to leave. Thank you for Emma, the name that means whole because somehow, despite everything, I'm learning to be exactly that. We stayed until sunset, talking and remembering and planning the future. And when we finally drove home to the house on Ashwood Lane, to the place where both my stories began, I felt something I'd never quite felt before. Complete acceptance of all the contradictions. I was Emma Morrison, daughter of a woman who'd disappeared and a woman who'd stayed. I was the product of sacrifice and secrecy, of mental illness and fierce love, of lies meant to protect and truths that set free. I was broken and whole, damaged and determined, angry and forgiving all at once. And that was okay. That was human. That was real. That night I added my own entry to Margaret's diary, the first new words written in 17 years. Dear Margaret, I'm 17 now. I know everything. I've read all your words, seen all your photos, learned your story. And I want you to know I'm okay. I'm more than okay. I'm going to be okay in ways you never got the chance to be. I'm getting help for my anxiety. I'm learning about our family's mental health history. I'm refusing to be ashamed of the genes we share. I'm going to study psychology and help other mothers who are struggling the way you struggled. I'm going to make sure what happened to you helps prevent the same tragedy from happening to others. Claire raised me well. She loved me fiercely. She also lied to me, and we're working through that, but she gave me everything she had. You chose the right person to trust with me. You chose the right person to be my mother when you couldn't be. I forgive you for not being able to love me the way a mother should. I forgive you for the darkness that wanted to use you to hurt me. I forgive you for leaving. And I hope, wherever you are, you've found peace. I hope you've found treatment. I hope you've forgiven yourself. Thank you for my name. Thank you for trying. Thank you for loving me enough to disappear. Love. Emma, your daughter, though Claire earned that title too. I closed the diary and placed it on my shelf, next to the photo of Margaret holding me as a newborn, her eyes full of fear and love in equal measure. Tomorrow, I'd wake up in the house she'd fled from, raised by the sister she'd trusted with her greatest treasure, carrying both their legacies forward into a future